I'm going to show you how hackers make phishing websites that steal passwords. And for this demonstration, we'll be using the Facebook login page as our phishing site. Now, I'm going to tell you straight away, I'm not doing this so you can steal your little buddy's Facebook password and post pictures of wieners to his page. I'm doing this for aspiring cybersecurity professionals, ethical hackers, penetration testers, or anyone who wants to learn how these type of attacks work, so you can avoid falling victim to them. So the first thing I'll do is demonstrate what happens when a victim enters their username and password and clicks login, and then we'll take a look at how hackers actually build these sites. So this is our phishing site. It looks exactly like Facebook's login page, but we are not on facebook.com. We are on my local host at port 8080. And behind this browser, I've got a VS Code editor and two files, one HTML file and one PHP file. Those two files make up this entire phishing site, and we'll take a look at both of them here in a minute. But first, let's put ourselves in the shoes of a victim, and let's say that our victim clicked on a link that he shouldn't have clicked on, and he thinks he's about to log in to the actual Facebook login page, but instead he's on this phishing site. But he doesn't know that, and he wants to like a picture of his grandson. So he enters his username and his password. So take note of the username and take note of the password for his favorite TV lawyer, and clicks login. Okay, well, it looks like nothing happened, but if we look at the URL, we are no longer on my local host at port 8080. We are on facebook.com, and we are looking at Facebook's actual login page. So what the heck just happened? Let's minimize this browser and see. So here is my VS Code editor, and here is the HTML file and the PHP file that I told you about. But I didn't mention anything about a TXT file. What is this? Holy cow. This is a TXT file with the username and the password in clear text. And these are the same username and password that I just used to log into my Facebook account. This shouldn't be here. Well, this is exactly what the hacker wanted to happen. So next, let's reproduce this attack from scratch and talk about how you can stay safe. So first thing I'll do is delete this TXT file. We don't need this. And let's delete the contents of this HTML file because we will be building this entirely from scratch. So I just deleted that. Let's save this. And let's stop my local server that I've got running. Bring back up my browser. And we'll revisit localhost and see that the server is now stopped. Return to VS Code. And we'll take a look at this PHP file a little bit later on. But for now, let's build this entirely from scratch. So if you want to follow along, now is the time. I'm going to exit out of this. And from my terminal, I'm going to navigate to that same directory. So let's go home. And if you want to follow along, there are a couple of prerequisites. I'll be using VS Code and PHP for the server and the server-side scripting language. So if you want to follow along, you'll need VS Code and you'll need to install PHP. If you install any version of PHP 5.4 or later, it should have a built-in server, so you can use the same command as me to start the server. You can use any editor and any server you want though. You don't have to use those two, but that's what I'll be using for this video. Next, I'm going to navigate to the directory that contains those two files from my terminal. And this is that directory right here. So I've got it stored on my desktop. Okay, and we are now in that directory. You can see our index.html file and our post.php file here. And this command will launch VS Code if you're following along. So enter. And we are right back where we were, except now you're with me. So let's put some text in here. And let's save this. And let's start our server so we can see what will become our phishing site, which is this HTML file. This HTML file will be the GUI of our phishing site. So if you're using PHP, this command will start a server on your local host at port 8080. Let's start it, bring up our browser, and let's refresh and see the text of our phishing site that is under construction. So we can return in about 30 seconds, and this will look exactly like Facebook's login page. How exactly? Well, let's open a new tab, and this time let's visit Facebook's login page, the real Facebook login page. So this time we are on facebook.com. And I'm using Safari, but you can use any browser you want. Any browser you're using should have the same feature. So I'm going to right click and go show page source. And this is the source code for Facebook's login page. So next, let's select all of this, copy it. Let's minimize our browser. Return to VS Code, and let's delete the text in this HTML file, and let's just paste in everything that we just copied. So now I'm going to save this. Let's bring back up our browser, and we don't need facebook.com anymore, so I'm going to close out of this. So we're back on localhost port 8080. Let's refresh. And here is our phishing site. It looks just like Facebook's login page. Now there are a couple more things we need to do before this will function the way we expect it to. So let's minimize this. And within this HTML file, we need to find a post method. So to do that, I will Command F. Should be Control F on a Windows, search for method. And we can see this is the only instance in this file, and this is indeed the post method. So a post method is used to send data to a server, and the data in question here is the username and password. So Facebook's original intent was to send that data to a file on its server so that it can authenticate this user. But as a hacker, I am not authenticating anything. I want to send this to a file on my server so that I can just steal the password. And to do that, we need to update this action attribute. So this action attribute belongs to this form, and this action attribute specifies where to send that form data, i.e. the username and password, once that form is submitted. And that form is submitted whenever that login button is clicked. So we want to delete everything between these quotes, and we want to send that data to our PHP file right here. So we will specify post.php as the form action attribute, and we need to do one more thing, which is delete this ID. Otherwise, the username and password will be encrypted. So let's save this, return to our browser, and we now have a phishing site that is fully capable of stealing a victim's password. But how does somebody actually wind up on one of these phishing sites? Well, earlier I mentioned that our victim probably clicked on a link that he shouldn't have clicked on, but where did he get that link, and why did he click on it? Surely he's already got Facebook's login page saved as one of his favorites. Why didn't he just log in that way? Well, he probably got tricked into it by a phishing email. So next, let's switch over to this tab, and let's have a look at an example of one such phishing email. Now, this is a spoofed email that I just sent to myself, but this is based on an actual phishing email that is circulating right now. So let's quickly read through this. Subject line, urgent action required, account suspended. Thanks for posting on Facebook. We have received multiple complaints about content posted to your profile. We have suspended your account because of this. Please log in within 24 hours to dispute, or your account may be subject to termination. Regards, the Facebook team. Okay, there are a few things about this email that should set off red flags right away. First, urgent action required. This is a common tactic used by phishers to try and get you to react based on emotion rather than common sense. Next, this says it's from Facebook, but this clearly is not a Facebook email address. This is spoofed. Also, they do not address me by name. Instead, they use this very generic greeting of thanks for posting on Facebook. And down here again, they are telling me that I must log in within 24 hours to dispute. Why don't you dispute these nuts? And they provide a link here for a convenient login. So let's hover over this link for a second. And you can see the floating thumbnail underneath says that we'll be going to www.facebook.com, so that's fine. But if you take note of down here where my cursor is, hopefully you can see where I'm clicking down here in the bottom left. Keep your eyes trained down here, please, and I'm going to hover over this link one more time. So down there in the bottom left corner where my cursor was, you can see there is a different floating thumbnail that says Open Localhost 8080 in a new window. That, of course, is the URL for our phishing website. Now, in reality, a hacker is not going to point you to localhost port 8080, but this is just a demonstration, so hopefully you can understand that in reality you would be pointed to a publicly accessible URL. Alright, so let's click on this. And of course, we land on our phishing website. See URL. Okay, so before our second victim logs in, remember that we only have two files here in our VS Code, HTML and PHP. So our second victim goes to log in. This one also has an AOL account. So take note of the victim's username and password. Clicks login. Probably thinks nothing happened, attributes this to some computer nonsense he doesn't understand. We know, however, that he was redirected to Facebook's login page, the real login page. Probably tries to log in again, this time successfully, and thinks nothing of it. Goes about his life and never gives it a second thought, and this happens every single day. So let's go ahead and exit out of this and see what happened. Okay, here is that TXT file that we expected to be created, and as we expect, here is the second victim's username and password. Alright, so let's have a look at this PHP file and see how this happened. This is very simple PHP code. I will go over this quickly. This first line here will open a file with this name if it exists. If it doesn't exist, it will create a file with that name and then open it. This post variable is a global PHP variable that is used to store the data sent over by the post method. Recall, in our HTML file, we modified the form action attribute of the post method to point to this post.php file. So what happens is, after that login button is clicked, that data, i.e. the username and password, is sent to this file and stored in this post variable right here. So next, we are just writing the contents of that variable as key value pairs to our txt file. And then finally down here is where our victim is redirected to Facebook's actual login page. Okay, and something that I just remembered I forgot to mention when we were looking at the email. If you've heard nothing else I've said, please hear ye this. If you receive a suspicious email, never click on any link within that email. If instead you're concerned about your Facebook profile, just visit facebook.com, the real facebook.com, and log into your profile from there. If there is anything amiss with your profile, you should be able to see it. And that's not just for Facebook, that should go for any company. That is my biggest piece of advice to stay safe. So stay safe, stay hard, and I'll see you at my next video.